Good afternoon. Today is obviously a big day in our 15-month fight against COVID-19. The people of Massachusetts have been through so much over the past year, but together they have done a spectacular job of putting COVID on the run. I want to start by thanking so many people here in Massachusetts for getting vaccinated, and to the men and the women who put together the clinics that made it possible for Massachusetts to be a national leader in its vaccination effort. At this point in time, 78% of all adult residents now have had at least one dose of COVID-19 vaccine. Over 3.5 million people are fully vaccinated. We think that number will be 3.6 tomorrow. And over 4.3 million people in Massachusetts have had at least a first dose. New cases have dropped by 94% since they peaked in January. The positive test rate is down to 0.8%, and hospitalizations are down by about 90% since their peak. This progress has made it possible for us to lift all remaining COVID restrictions across the Commonwealth effective tomorrow. As a reminder, all industries will be permitted to open, all capacity restrictions will be lifted, and all gathering limits will be rescinded. The face covering order will also be rescinded and replaced with a face covering advisory that's consistent with the CDC's recent updated guidance. Face coverings will still be required on public and private transportation systems and facilities that house vulnerable populations like congregate care settings. Some businesses may choose to keep mask or other requirements in place beyond May 29th. We ask everyone to be respectful and to follow their requirements. Also today, I'll sign an order that will rescind the state of emergency on June 15th. To prepare for the end of the state of emergency, we filed legislation to temporarily extend a few measures that were put in place by executive order over the previous 15 months. We'll work with our colleagues in the legislature and with municipal leaders to address these issues, hopefully before the 15th of June. I'm also issuing a modified declaration of a public health emergency under our public health statute. This declaration will ensure that the directives issued to ensure face coverings are worn in the specific settings that I mentioned earlier can take place, and to keep certain health measures in place to support the Commonwealth's continuing testing, tracing, and vaccination efforts. For the next school year, all schools will be required to be in person full-time, 5 days a week, and all education department health and safety requirements will be lifted, including distancing requirements. While everyone's been impacted by COVID over the past year, we know the impact the virus has had on our students has been especially difficult. But thankfully, the next school year will bring our students back to the classrooms, and in the weeks and months ahead, we anticipate many will have an opportunity with state, federal, and local resources to engage in summer programs to pick up on some of what they lost over the course of the year. We will also continue our vaccination program, and our goal remains the same, which is to make sure we put a vaccine in front of everybody who wants one. The science shows vaccinated people are highly unlikely to spread the virus to others. Getting vaccinated is the best way to protect you, your family, and your friends. The vaccine is free, and you don't need an ID or insurance to get one. There are over 900 vaccine clinics across Massachusetts, and they're widely available, and there's no wait. And a big part of the success we've seen in the drop in cases and hospitalizations and deaths since January is very much attributed to the people who've gotten vaccinated here in the Commonwealth. And we plan to continue our focus on increasing targeted community-based vaccine clinics and mobile clinics, and a big expansion of our homebound program to reach anyone that has an issue with getting a vaccine. We're increasing our mobile clinics in communities that were hit hardest by the virus, and we've been working with employers and schools to set up vaccination programs there as well. There's no wait, and we're going to continue to do everything we can to make it easy for people to get vaccinated here in Massachusetts. But if you are still waiting, please continue to wear a mask and keep your distance. But thanks to the people of Massachusetts who've made enormous sacrifices over the course of the past year to get us to this point, brighter days are very much upon us. We've been battling the virus for too long, but today we have an opportunity to put an exclamation point on all the hard work that so many people have done and continue to move Massachusetts forward together. Thank you very much, and with that, I will turn it over to the LG.
Good afternoon. Today is an important day in what has been a very long 15 months to fight the pandemic. I'm pleased to be here to mark the lifting of business restrictions and look forward to focusing our efforts on recovery, moving forward as we get closer to our goal of vaccinating 4 million residents. The people of our Commonwealth have been strong and resilient during what has been an incredibly difficult time. I wish to thank all of our residents in our communities across our state who stepped up and did their part throughout this past year. Thank you to our business owners who also stepped up to incorporate the numerous protocols to keep both workers and their customers safe. Thank our partners at the local level and our local boards of health for collaborating and working so hard with our administration to help us get to this point. As our nation-leading vaccination program allows us to take this step to fully reopen our Commonwealth, we launched a marketing campaign to encourage everyone to return to their favorite restaurants and support their favorite local businesses. The mission of the Let's Go Out campaign is to amplify restaurants as a driver of our way of life in Massachusetts as life returns to normal. It's a great addition to the My Local MA campaign that has been running since we launched it last summer. And with all of the restrictions on businesses being lifted tomorrow, we want to send the message that restaurants are open, and if you're vaccinated, get out there and enjoy the in-person dining experience once again. This campaign will remind people of what it was like, making memories with friends and family, and gathering together in your usual spots, or maybe even try something new and enjoy all that restaurants have to offer this summer and beyond. We're also going to educate consumers that restaurant dining may not be exactly the way it was before the pandemic. They may encounter safety measures like altered or reduced menus, changed floor plans, and contactless payment. All these changes are to keep both customers and staff safe. And finally, we know that many restaurants and other businesses are hiring, so hopefully this campaign will connect these businesses with people who want to get back to work. The campaign will ramp up over the summer and include online advertising and social media, posters, radio ads, and billboards at Fenway Park this week, with additional content to come, including a TV spot later in the summer during a Sox game. I want to thank the Massachusetts Restaurant Association, Mass Restaurants United, and members of the Restaurant Promotion Commission for their help and input on this campaign and for all they've done throughout this pandemic. More can be found at visitma.com/Let's Get Out. And thank you.
Questions?
Private businesses can open in person now. When are state agencies, like for instance the registry, that are open full-time in person? When can I just walk in there and do my license?
So the registry has received an enormous amount of positive feedback from its customers about the appointment-based approach to service. And people have found it to be incredibly helpful with respect to planning their day. And I think one of the things they're working their way through is whether they should go back to the first come, first serve, or stick with the appointment model, or go to some, I hate to use the word, hybrid version, where they would have certain time that would be walk-in and certain time that might be appointment only. But the registry is a great example of an agency that has managed to do a terrific job in person of serving its constituents and customers over the course of the whole pandemic, and has learned some valuable lessons about customer service and moving significant transactions that used to be done only on a face-to-face basis to the online world as well. And whatever they do, they'll do in conjunction with the relationship they have with AAA.
When do you expect that decision will be made?
Soon.
Like, a couple weeks, a couple days? When you say soon?
Soon. It'll be soon. I mean, short answer is they're going to continue to operate the way they have for the immediate future, because a lot of people have said they like it.
Governor, special message for people who have anxieties about returning to normal. And also, there's going to be signs you can't have to wear your mask when you go to stores. There's probably going to be some tension there. What is the messaging? I know you touched on it.
I think it's really important for all of us to understand that while we believe that the data, which has been the sort of North Star for us on all of these restrictions and advisories and orders and guidance since this began, at this point in time, does not support, a state of emergency and all of the restrictions that came with it. But that said, okay, there are still going to be individuals and there are going to be organizations that are going to want to continue to maintain some kind of commitment to some of those restrictions going forward. And as the Lieutenant Governor said, there are probably going to be some restaurants that want to organize their seating in a particular way. There may be folks who are going to continue to want to use appointments and not go to a walk-in model. I think all of us need to continue to be what Massachusetts has been since the start of this, which is respectful of their friends and their neighbors, and to recognize that not everybody's going to be in the same place psychologically as everybody else. It's been a really hard, tough year for people, and I think that's something people should incorporate into the way they think about that. If somebody has a business and they'd like you to wear a mask when you come in, you should wear a mask. I'm certainly going to do that, and I would expect and hope and anticipate, just given what I know about people generally, that will be the way people deal with it. Yeah. Well, yes. I mean, there could be situations where a local community would make the decision to put that kind of an ordinance in place because they think that would be the appropriate ordinance for them to have in their community. But at this point in time, there's one red community in Massachusetts. I think there's over 200 gray communities, and might even be north of 100 green ones at this point. 99, okay. So, I mean, generally speaking, and I think we're down to 9,000 cases, active cases. I mean, the numbers are low enough at this point that I think people, it would be very difficult for us to justify the kind of restrictions that were part of our safety campaign over the course of the past year, which is why we're doing what we're doing today. But, as we've said all along, if a local community believes that there's a particular strategy or approach with regard to some of this that they think is important for them, that's their call.
Governor, has Secretary...
Officials are asking people to have their vaccine cards post this weekend, Memorial Day, make a big one. What do you think about that? Especially with some businesses saying, show me your vaccinated
We've said all along that we're not going to require vaccine cards, passports, whatever your term is, but we have anticipated that there will be organizations that will want people to demonstrate they've been vaccinated. Given the fact that the CDC's guidance has vaccinated guidance and unvaccinated guidance, it's not inappropriate for people in certain circumstances to think that way. But again, that's an individual decision to be made by an individual organization. That's not something that we would consider requiring for anybody.
Governor, has your administration tallied up how many restaurants we have lost and how many people's businesses have gone under, even as we are able to go back to restaurants?
Do you know the numbers on this?
I know the Restaurant Association has some numbers on that.
Do you know what they are?
Do we know what they are? I think they said about 15% of the restaurants, but we should check into that.
Yeah, so those are businesses that are never going to come back. What can your message be to people that have suffered through this in terms of the pandemic killing business?
I think I've said many times that the pandemic has come with an enormous amount of loss, anxiety, isolation, and in some cases, sort of severe consequences. And there are folks I know who have said to me, I didn't get any smarter when the pandemic began. I just happened to be on the right side of the COVID curve. And there are other folks who've said, I didn't get any dumber, but our business, our industry was on the wrong side of the COVID curve. And in some ways, that's the most difficult thing of all. It's not like anybody did anything wrong. They just happened to be in a business that COVID hammered. And that's one of the reasons why we've tried as a Commonwealth to be so supportive of initiatives to provide people with assistance on their way through if they're small businesses that were on the wrong side of the curve, and have been very aggressive about creating rental assistance programs that are among the very best in the country, and have also been incredibly active in federal conversations around how to handle issues around UI and support for people who are on unemployment. And it's also one of the reasons why we've asked the legislature to up the ante on the money we spend on technical training and sort of, giving people opportunities to pursue alternatives from the ones they had before if the business they're in was one of the ones that got hit in a particularly hard way. I know for so many of these folks, people have literally, I got some mail from some folks who are in the conference business. Very successful. And in Massachusetts, it was a great place to be in the conference business because between our colleges and our universities and our financial institutions and our life science sector, there were conferences everywhere. And there were so many areas in which we were considered to be a global leader and a thought leader. That business went away, like almost overnight. And those folks have really struggled with what to do and how to find a way back. And, I went to this governor's meeting in Nashville the other day. Nashville is all about live music. Well, there hasn't been a lot of live music for the better part of the past year. So all kinds of people who built careers on their ability to, put up and take down and support live music shows, basically had everything they've been doing pretty much wiped away for the better part of a year. And I think in many ways, this will be one of the most challenging issues we're all going to face coming out of this, which is how do we help people in those industries stand themselves back up to the extent that they can. We've tried very hard to keep them whole over the period of time of the past year in the midst of all this, and then to help the ones who are looking to do something else find a way to do something else, because they didn't do anything wrong. They just happened to be in a space that got hammered by a global pandemic.
Governor, I was wondering if your thoughts on the Sudders report on the Holyoke Village Home on Sunday. Are you troubled by some of the omissions and errors pointed out in the Philistine report?
Well, first of all, the Pearlstein report, which we commissioned in the aftermath of the terrible tragedy at the Holyoke Soldiers' Home, is very similar to a lot of the findings that came out of both the legislative report and several other independent reports that have been done. And I do hope, based on a quick read of the legislative report that came out a couple days ago, that we will be able to work with the legislature to implement many of the reforms that are in that report, which are very similar to the reforms that were recommended in the Pearlstein report, so that we can make sure we have the right operating structure in place for Holyoke and the other soldiers' homes going forward.
Last question.
Certain things that Wilson was wrong about or omitted many times, didn't even directly criticize you or Secretary Sudders. Did you talk about Wilson before you released it? And I guess you feel that those were omissions and errors. Do you think there were omissions and errors that within the work of this?
I think the vast majority of the Pearlstein findings were completely consistent with the other independent reports that were done.
Several members said they would like to see you come over and answer further questions on the Holyoke Village Home. Is that something you will do?
So the good news, to the extent there is some on this issue, is the legislative report and the Pearlstein report and our legislation that we filed earlier in the year are all basically chasing the same reforms. And they're critical reforms, they're important reforms, and I'm anxious to work with the legislature to get them done. And I fully expect those are things we'll be talking to them about in the weeks ahead.
Can you just share your thoughts as you were sitting there making it official, putting it on paper to lift these, to rescind these restrictions? Is this over, and what was going on in your mind as you were signing that?
I mean, honestly, I've said before that this was the most difficult thing I've ever done in my professional career. Usually in management jobs, there are good answers. It's pretty unusual to end up in a situation where you're constantly faced with a whole series of least worst choices. And to get back to Jonathan's question, the number of people that the Lieutenant Governor and I have talked to, communicated with, exchanged correspondence with over the course of this year, who have gone through profoundly difficult times and circumstances, is at times overwhelming. And I have to say how grateful I am that people here in the Commonwealth, adopted, adapted, adjusted, supported one another. There were so many private foundations that raised money. There were so many charitable organizations that stepped up, and so many just astonishing stories of kindness and grace and generosity. But the most important thing people did was they got vaccinated. And I said at one point in March that we were in a race against time, and that race was between our vaccination program and the variants. And people here won that race to get to the point where 78% of our adults, 90% of people over the age of 75 got vaccinated. And while it was a high anxiety challenge, I think, for both the people who were getting vaccinated and the people who were vaccinating people, 3.5 million people in Massachusetts are fully vaccinated. 4.3 million people have had at least one shot. I mean, it is in some respects a profound demonstration of how people here stepped up when they really needed to make it possible for us to put this thing behind us. And I am hugely grateful that so many people did it. So if you were to ask me, I think the word that would come to mind would be gratitude more than anything else.
Can a business require you to get a vaccine before they hire you in our state?
I don't know what the legal answer is to that question. I mean, my guess is, I don't know the answer. We'll have to get back to you on that one.
In terms of, I haven't heard you say the words it's over. Is it?
I think it's pretty, I mean, unless something very odd happens, I would say that it is pretty much over. But I've learned with the COVID virus that the last thing you should ever do is presume you know everything it is to know about it, because that's one other thing I would say about the past years. The facts on the ground were constantly changing, and the knowledge base that we were all operating on was constantly changing. And for that reason, I would put an asterisk on anything that says it's over, okay? But I do believe that it is certainly on the run in a big way, and given the data as it currently exists right now, Massachusetts is in a place where we can lift these restrictions and do so with a fairly high degree of confidence that people have done the things that we needed to do to beat this thing down.
Now that it's just about over, you decided to go back to
That's pretty clever. That's something the Lieutenant Governor and I and our families are going to talk about. But we've been really focused on this.
Governor, I noticed yesterday over on handshakes, there were hugs, you were out amongst people, something you said many times was something you really missed. How was it, and did it seem strange that I could be interacting with people?
Interacting with people did not feel strange. It felt wonderful. There are a lot of people there that she and I, the Lieutenant Governor and I, have gotten to know very well over the course of the past 7 years. And I think in some ways, I read a study at one point in the midst of all the stuff that I was reading during this about the psychological and physical benefits of hugs. And like so much, COVID just took all that stuff away. And there was one person in particular who really couldn't get through what she wanted to tell me without breaking down. And a year ago, I would have had to just stand there and watch, which would have been awful. And instead, I was able to do the thing that all of us want to do when someone we care about is in distress, which is I hugged her. And I hope and anticipate that that sort of thing will come back to being very commonplace, because it is one of the ways we all buck each other up.
So vaccine rollout, a lot of incentives have been announced this week. There's 3 zones today, there's 3 scientific this weekend. Can you talk about how the state plans to reduce that last, 20% of adults, and will there be more incentives announced to keep sweeping the pot?
Well, I think one of the things we've done with a lot of these is you try a variety of things and see which ones work, and if they seem to generate traction, then you do more of them. And I think you're likely to see us continue to do that. But the thing we're probably going to do the most with is this idea of pop-ups and mobiles and almost like home delivery. I mean, at this point in time, if you call and you say you can't get a vaccine, you can't get to a vaccine location, we'll deliver one to you. And I think that's going to be the kind of thing that's going to drive a big piece of this. You'll see a lot more pop-ups. You'll see a lot more vaccine sites, mobile sites done in places where there are populations in communities where we still have a ways to go. And we'll continue to use a lot of trusted voices and partners in those communities to get it done. In some cases, we'll try some incentives and see which ones work and which ones don't. But we're going to keep doing this throughout the summer. This is not going to stop.
Are we going to reach the 4.1 million next week, as you said earlier, June?
Yeah. I think it'll probably be more like mid-June, but the fact that 4.3 million people already have a first dose has turned out to be a pretty big deal in most of the research that's been done so far.
They come back in 2 or 3 weeks.
Yeah.
You filed a bill for the families that, can you speak to the importance of that and more than
Massachusetts is constantly, and I give the legislature huge credit on this as well, is constantly looking for ways to enhance the benefits that we make available to veterans and their families here in the Commonwealth. And this particular piece of legislation is something we filed pre-pandemic, and it just got lost. And I do believe that at some point during the course of this session, it'll get passed. And it'll be sort of what I would refer to as Valor 3. It comes on the heels of 2 other bills that were pretty similar.
So we're going to follow up on one thing. Last you said when you released the broken report that you had never spoken to a man that falls for employment. Your administration member said that you need interviewing employment. Why did you say you never done that?
I forgot. The board at Holyoke, which had the legal authority to do so, chose him. And he and I had a brief interview before I swore him in. I think it was about a 30-minute conversation.
Thanks, guys.
Thanks, everybody, and hope you have a nice weekend. Oh, my pen. Yeah.